Hello everyone. This is one of our weekly updates for the course. In this update I want to talk a little bit about the group discussion that you had on fake news. I'll talk a little bit about the browsing communication journals assignment and give you some quick previews of what's coming up. So in terms of the group discussion, it was really good. I thought that people had raised some really interesting questions, and it was interesting to see the conversation. I think you guys overall did a really terrific job on that. It's what I want to see. I thought I'd also sort of join that conversation. I have sort of grouped some of the conversation into a set of questions. So one of the important things with research is the way in which we're led to research by the questions that we have. Not by what we think are the answers. So sometimes I think in our heads we already have a pet theory or an idea about why we think something's happening. But if that guides our research, sort of an answer we think already exists, we oftentimes get in a place that doesn't work super well for research. So it's better to think about what questions you might have about a particular topic area. And of course, we started with this article about fake news because the literature review assignment that you'll do for me in this class is going to be about this idea of fake news. Now, students are free to write about that issue from a wide variety of perspectives and to relate that issue to a number of other communication areas, as you were asked to do in your research topics assignment this week. But there will be some commonalities amongst these things. We'll read some common assignments together that you can utilize this information. And we're just building a broader understanding of this topic as we read through different sources throughout the course and have these kinds of conversations. So I thought I'd pull together a few of the sort of questions that I culled from the conversation that you all participated in around fake news. One is, just the really big question that seems to emerge from this is like, what is the internet? So we're sometimes using this term just in general. Well, on the internet, there can be any information we want. Well, can't there? What do we mean by that? One participant mentioned just the vastness of the internet. So we should be sort of conscientious about that term and maybe be more specific. Is the internet really everything? Or are there certain things, certain areas of the internet that seem to matter more in this conversation of fake news? So some of the questions that help us get at that are things like, how does the internet differ from previous forms of information? Traditional newspapers or television news programs or, your neighbor down the street or, other places where people have pre-internet gotten news and information about their world. What's different now? It seems like one of the things that's different, and a few people mentioned this more specifically, is social media. So we could ask those questions. So how is social media different? What is different about it from other types of sources of information? And when we think about the specifics of those differences, we start to get at some more interesting complexities and nuances about how the intranet or social media might be contributing to this area of fake news. Some people ask, what role do parents play in helping children learn to determine what's false or what is accurate information? Related questions could be things like, what role should the schools play? Or what role should society play? Or should social media platforms themselves be involved in helping to determine what is good and bad information, or false or accurate information? More generally is the question of sort of how do we stop fake news? And I think this is a really important set of questions because people have different views on this, right? It's not just a matter of facts, but there's opinions that come into play here. Some people believe that this is primarily should be the job of parents, and other people think actually, since most fake news gets circulated via Facebook, it should be the job of Facebook to stop this problem. right? So depending on how you view this situation and what role you think different groups in society might have, you're going to approach it from different ways, and you're going to seek out different kinds of responses and answers. And then the last set of questions is, just sort of, are younger kids. This article makes the argument that it's these sort of young kids, students, who are bad at determining what fake news is. But is it really true that they're worse than anyone else? Some people asked, have we ever been duped? I'm sure I have been duped by fake news in the past. So is it really just young kids, or is it everyone? If it is just young kids, what's specific about younger groups, students, right, children, that make them more likely to be duped by false information? Or if it's everyone, why? Why are we duped by this? What are the specifics of this that create this larger problem within society? So I think in approaching this issue of fake news through the kinds of questions we might ask, we start to see the connections that this issue has to other areas, and we start to think about it in a bit more of a complex way. I want to talk to you just briefly about the browsing communication research assignment that you did. Most people did a fine job with this. I'll say a quick note, I didn't grade, and I won't grade on the accuracy of your APA citations until we meet the week where we're discussing APA citation style specifically. But it is a good idea to try to do this correctly. Most people did a pretty good job at getting there. I'll mention just two things that seem to be real common mistakes. One is that in APA citations, we use a DOI number to address an online source rather than retrieved from, which is MLA. The other thing is that in a title of an article in APA, you only capitalize the first word of the title, the first word after the colon, or any proper nouns. The rest are not capitalized. So that was a big issue, is capitalization. So, if you have a chance to look that up beforehand, it will help you when you are going to be required to do those correctly. A few things I want to say about the research guide, about the assignment guidelines. It is really important that you follow these in the way that they're written, because write them in a way in the hopes that you'll learn some skills. So for instance, in this assignment, I asked you to look for 3 very specific journals and to browse those journals when you looked for the articles. I chose those specific journals for a few reasons. One is that these specific journals tend to publish articles that are relevant to the different concentrations that we have in the communication department. So public relations, communication and culture, and media studies, or film, video, media studies. So I wanted to give you a little sense of what those areas, the research that people in those areas might do. The other reason is because I want you to practice how to find a specific journal in the library so that you could look at a citation that someone might offer and be able to follow that citation and find a specific source. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's one of the things that's good to practice. So if you didn't do the assignment in that way, I do recommend that you, if you have time, go back and look at those specific journals and make sure you know how to find specific journals within the library. Many people mentioned that what they noticed about the kinds of topics overall is that, there's a pretty broad array, that they often focus on, contemporary issues or problems, and media tends to be central, and that most of you were able to find really research that was and scholarship that was really interesting to that worked well with your own interests, and that's really important. A few other people noticed that, there's a lot of big words, and the articles were structured in a similar way. They tended to be very detailed, complex, and in-depth, had a lot of references, and that the researchers were doing research. They were collecting their own data or creating their own argument of some sort. Those are really great things to pay attention to, because those are some of the characteristics that define scholarly research. An important thing to keep in mind is that you may have felt like this was a little scary if it's the first time you've looked at an article like this. It certainly is complex. There may very well be words that you do not understand. I can still pick up a journal article and read words I do not understand. The important thing is that you know that we're just starting to learn how to read this material right now. You aren't expected to know how to do this completely at this point in time. So don't be too intimidated by that, right? We're going to be learning techniques and tools to help you become better readers at this, and you're going to have many other classes to practice these skills in, not just this one. So please keep that in mind and don't be too intimidated by what you may have seen. The Unit 1 test, people did quite well on this. I will note one thing about that test is that this question seemed to trip everyone but one person up. I suppose it could be seen as a little bit of a trick question. It wasn't meant to be. I think one of the interesting things is actually how similar most of the topics in communication studies research are today, even to what they were in the 1980s. So while most people marked false, this was actually true. That said, it seemed to be create enough confusion that I gave it to you. So I've changed the scores on your tests to reflect that change. If you don't have a score on your test to go back, it means I don't have your test. So you might want to get in there and get that completed as soon as possible. Finally, I just want to finish up with a little bit of looking ahead. Within the next day or two, you will have some feedback on your topic ideas that were posted in the discussion, so make sure you go back there and see what I've written. It's not a lot, but it's just kind of a continuation of a conversation, a few things to think about as you move forward. You will start your next assignment for that literature review, so working with that topic this coming week. This is a long assignment, popular and reference sources and keywords. It's something like this. I can't remember the exact title. It's a long assignment. It will take you probably 3 hours to complete. So I recommend you get started on it this week. You should know that in the schedule it says it's due this upcoming Sunday, but I'm actually extending that due date until the 6th of October. So you have a little bit more time to work on it, but like I said, it's long. So I recommend you get started on it as soon as you can. And then week 3 will be leaving soon. I will be shutting that off so that you can't see it. So if there is any work that you haven't completed in that week, please do so as soon as possible because you won't be able to access like the assignment guidelines or the overview material. Okay, so if you have questions, please send me an email, and that should do it for the week.